Jerry stood there, feeling like he was outside of his own body, watching the scene unfold as if it were happening to someone else. The church was filled with the soft hum of guests whispering, the air tinged with anticipation and the sweet scent of floral arrangements. Heather, radiant in her white gown, walked down the aisle with a confidence that Jerry envied. He tried to muster a smile, but it felt as if his facial muscles were on strike. As Heather approached, Jerry caught a glimpse of his reflection in a nearby polished surface. The man staring back at him was a stranger, dressed in a suit that felt like a costume, wearing an expression that didn't reach his eyes. Heather reached him, her smile wide and expectant. "We're doing this, Jerry." "Can you believe it?" she whispered, a hint of triumph in her voice. Jerry nodded, the word yes leaving his mouth automatically, but his heart screamed. No, he glanced over Heather's shoulder, hoping for an escape, but found only the faces of friends and family, their smiles a mixture of happiness and polite curiosity. The ceremony began, and the officiant's words floated over Jerry like a distant melody. "Do you, Jerry, take Heather to be your lawfully wedded wife, to live together in marriage, to love her, comfort her, honor and keep her for better or worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and health, and forsaking all others, be faithful only to her for as long as you both shall live?" Jerry's mind raced. He thought of Kelly, the daughter he had yet to meet but already loved. He thought of Hannah, the woman who still occupied the corners of his heart, her image a ghost that refused to fade. And then there was Heather, standing before him, expecting a life that Jerry wasn't sure he could give. He swallowed hard, the words sticking in his throat like dry leaves. "I do," he finally managed, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. As the ceremony concluded and the guests erupted into applause, Jerry felt a hand on his shoulder. It was his best man, Mike, who leaned in and whispered, "You okay, man? You looked like you were about to bolt." Jerry forced a laugh, a sound that felt foreign to him. "Just nerves," I guess he lied, his voice a stranger to his own ears. Mike clapped him on the back, a knowing look in his eyes. "Well, it's done now. Heather's a great girl. You're a lucky guy." "Yeah, lucky," Jerry echoed, the word hollow. As the reception unfolded, Jerry played his part, smiling for photos, sharing dances and making toasts. Yet, beneath the veneer of celebration, his mind was a tumult of regret and what-ifs. He found himself watching the door, half expecting, half hoping Hannah would walk through it and claim the life they never had the courage to pursue. Late into the evening, as the guests began to thin and the music softened, Jerry found a moment of solitude. He stepped outside, the cool night air a balm to his chaotic thoughts. Heather found him there, her expression softening as she approached. "There you are." "I thought I lost my groom," she said, her voice playful yet tinged with an undercurrent of something else. Was it insecurity? Possessiveness? Jerry turned to her, searching for the right words. "Heather, he began, but the words wouldn't come. How could he explain the depth of his turmoil? How could he confess that his heart belonged to another? Heather reached for his hand, her grip firm. "It's okay, Jerry. We're going to make this work. For us, for Kelly. We're a family now." Jerry looked into Heather's eyes, seeing not the future but a reflection of the compromise he had become. "Yeah, a family," he echoed, the promise feeling more like a sentence than a salvation. As they walked back into the reception hand in hand, Jerry realized that this was his life now. He had made his choice, however, reluctantly, and there was no turning back. But in the quiet corners of his heart, a voice whispered of another life, a path not taken, and love left unspoken. Jerry found himself sitting across from Mike at their old haunt, a dimly lit bar with the kind of worn comfort that only years of patronage could provide. The clink of glasses and the low murmur of conversations created a familiar backdrop as Jerry stared into his drink, lost in thought. "Mike, ever the observer, broke the silence. You've been miles away since the wedding, man. What's eating you? Jerry sighed, the weight of his thoughts heavy on his shoulders. It's just everything. This marriage, Heather and Hannah. Mike's expression softened, understanding dawning. Hannah, huh? I thought that ship had sailed long ago. Jerry chuckled dryly. So did I. But seeing her again, it's like reopening an old wound I thought had healed. Mike leaned in, his interest piqued. What happened exactly? You never did tell me the whole story. Jerry took a deep breath, the memories flooding back. We were in college together, you know. Hannah and we clicked instantly, but neither of us made a move. Too shy, too scared, I guess. We'd spend hours talking about everything and nothing. I felt alive around her, Mike. She understood me in a way no one else did. Mike nodded, urging him to continue. One day we were studying together at her place. It was late, and we were alone. I remember thinking, this is it, Jerry. Tell her how you feel, but just as I was about to say something, her roommate barged in, and the moment was gone. After that we graduated in life. Just happened. Mike shook his head, a rueful smile on his lips. Man, that's rough. So you never told her? Jerry shook his head, regret etched into his features. Never. And then I met Heather at work. When she told me she was pregnant, I felt like I had no choice but to marry her. I thought I could bury my feelings for Hannah, but seeing her again, it's like nothing's changed. Mike placed a comforting hand on Jerry's shoulder. You can't live your life on what-ifs, Jerry. You've got a wife and a daughter who need you. Maybe it's time to let go of the past and focus on the present. Jerry nodded, knowing Mike was right but feeling the tug of what could have been. I know. It's just hard, you know. Every time I close my eyes I see Hannah's face and I wonder, what if? The two men sat in silence, the weight of unspoken dreams hanging between them. Finally, Jerry raised his glass in a silent toast to lost love and the paths not taken. Mike clinked his glass against Jerry's, a solemn acknowledgement of his friend's pain. To moving forward, he said, a note of hope in his voice. Jerry forced a smile, the ghost of Hannah lingering in his heart. To moving forward, he echoed, though the echo of the past remained, a whisper in the dark. Jerry found himself at the old coffee shop where he and Hannah had spent countless hours lost in conversation during their college days. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind that made the world outside the windows look like a blurred watercolor painting. He was nursing a lukewarm latte when the bell above the door jingled, and like a scene from a movie, Hannah walked in, shaking off her umbrella. The sight of her sent a jolt through Jerry's heart, a mix of nostalgia and a kind of longing he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. She hadn't noticed him yet, busy with her umbrella and the rain-soaked world outside. Taking a deep breath, Jerry stood up, his chair scraping softly against the floor. Hannah, he called out, his voice steadier than he felt. Hannah turned, her expression shifting from surprise to a warm, genuine smile. Jerry? Is that really you? It's been ages. They hugged, a brief, awkward embrace that spoke volumes of the years and experiences that lay between them. As they sat down, the conversation flowed as easily as it had years ago, filled with updates about their lives, mutual friends, and reminiscences of their college days. It was during a lull in the conversation, as they both sipped their drinks, that Jerry found the courage to broach the subject that had been haunting him. Hannah, I've always wondered. Back in college, was there ever a moment, between us? Hannah's eyes met his, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. She sighed, a small, thoughtful sound. Jerry, I thought you'd never ask. Yes, there was something. I always hoped you'd say something, but then life happened, I guess. Jerry felt a pang of regret, sharp and sudden. I always felt the same. I was just too scared to ruin what we had. And then I met Heather, and everything changed. The mention of Heather hung in the air, an uninvited presence at their table. Hannah nodded, her expression understanding. And now you're married, with a daughter, right? I saw the pictures on social media. She looks just like you. Yeah, Kelly. She's my world, Jerry said, the pride evident in his voice. But Hannah, there's something you should know. Heather and it's complicated. She told me she was pregnant, and I felt like I had no choice but to marry her. But I've always wondered about us, what could have been. Hannah reached across the table, her hand briefly covering his. Jerry, it's okay. We were young, and we made the best decisions we could at the time. You have a family now, and that's wonderful. But maybe it's time to let go of the past and focus on your future. Jerry nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. You're right, of course. It's just hard, to think about what might have been. Hannah smiled, a bittersweet curve of her lips. I know. But sometimes, life's about making the best of where we are, not where we could have been. You have a chance to build something beautiful with your family, Jerry. Don't let the ghosts of the past hold you back. As they parted ways that afternoon, Jerry felt a sense of closure, mingled with a deep-seated regret. The crossroads where he stood seemed less daunting now, though the path ahead was still unclear. He realized that moving forward meant letting go, not just of Hannah, but of the myriad of what-ifs that had kept him anchored to a past that no longer existed. Walking back into the rain, Jerry felt a resolve forming within him. It was time to face his present, to be the husband and father his family needed, even if the journey required leaving a piece of his heart behind at the crossroads. Jerry sat at the kitchen table, the morning light casting long shadows across the floor. The house was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp of a bird outside. Heather was still asleep, and Kelly, their daughter, was at a sleepover. It was rare for Jerry to find a moment of solitude like this, and yet, instead of relishing it, he felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of his own life. The sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts, and Heather appeared, rubbing her eyes, her hair tousled from sleep. Morning, she mumbled, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Morning, Jerry replied, his voice flat, the word feeling more like a sentence than a greeting. Heather sat down opposite him, her gaze sharp. You're up early. Thinking about work? Jerry shook his head, the lie too heavy on his tongue this morning. No, not work. Just thinking. Heather sipped her coffee, watching him. About us. Jerry hesitated, the truth a dangerous precipice he found himself teetering on. Yeah, us. Heather, do you ever feel like we're just going through the motions? Heather set her cup down, her expression hardening. What's that supposed to mean, Jerry? That you're not happy? Jerry sighed, the weight of his words pressing down on him. I don't know if I am. I feel trapped, Heather. Like I'm living a life that's been decided for me. Heather's face flushed with anger and hurt. Trapped. You think I wanted this? A husband who's always distant, always lost in his own world. You think I don't feel trapped too? Jerry's heart sank. This wasn't how he wanted the conversation to go. Heather, I didn't mean. No, I get it, Jerry. I'm not blind. I've seen the way you look at her, at Hannah. You think I don't know? You married me because you felt obligated, not because you wanted me. The accusation hung in the air, a tangible thing between them. Jerry's silence was answer enough. Heather laughed, a bitter sound. I thought if I pushed hard enough, if I made us a family, you'd eventually forget her. But I was wrong. You can't force someone to love you. Jerry reached out, wanting to comfort her, to take back the hurt his words had caused, but Heather stood up, pushing her chair back with a scrape that echoed too loudly in the quiet kitchen. I don't want to be your cage, Jerry. But I don't know how to be anything else. Not with you. Jerry watched her walk away, the distance between them growing with each step. He knew she was right. He had allowed himself to be trapped by his own indecision, his own fears. And now Heather, the woman he had married, the mother of his child, felt just as trapped as he did. The realization was a cold splash of clarity. Their marriage, built on a foundation of obligation and unspoken truths, had become a cage for them both. Jerry knew something had to change, but the path forward was as unclear as ever. Sitting alone in the kitchen, Jerry understood that the first step to freedom, for both him and Heather, was honesty. It was time to confront the reality of their relationship, to face the consequences of his choices head-on. Only then could they hope to find a way out of the cage of obligation that had ensnared them both. The days following Jerry and Heather's confrontation were filled with a heavy silence, the kind that speaks louder than words ever could. Jerry found himself walking on eggshells, each interaction with Heather charged with an unspoken tension that left him exhausted. One evening, as Jerry sat on the couch, pretending to be engrossed in a book while actually lost in his own turbulent thoughts, Kelly bounded into the room, her presence like a burst of sunlight through the gloom. "Daddy, look what I made at school today," she exclaimed, waving a piece of paper with the proud flourish only a child can muster. Jerry set his book aside, a genuine smile breaking through his facade as he turned to his daughter. "Let's see, sweetheart." It was a drawing, crude in the way of all children's art, but unmistakably a portrait of their family. There he was, tall and somewhat lopsided, with Heather beside him, her hair a wild scribble of lines and Kelly between them, her smile a wide, happy curve. "It's us," Kelly declared, her voice filled with the simple conviction of youth. Jerry hugged her, the drawing a poignant reminder of what was at stake. "It's beautiful, Kel." "Thank you." As Kelly scampered off, content with her father's praise, Heather walked in, having overheard the exchange. She glanced at the drawing in Jerry's hand, a flicker of emotion crossing her face before she masked it with indifference. "She has quite the imagination," Heather commented, her voice neutral. Jerry looked up at her, the drawing in his hand feeling like a bridge and a barrier all at once. "Heather, we need to talk. About us, about everything." Heather sighed, the fight seemingly gone out of her. "What's there to talk about, Jerry? We both know how this ends." Jerry's heart clenched at her words, the finality in her voice a stark contrast to the turmoil inside him. "It doesn't have to end, not if we don't want it to. We can try to fix this for Kelly's sake, if not for ours." Heather sat down beside him, the distance between them more than just physical. "And what about what you want, Jerry? Can you honestly say you want this us?" Jerry hesitated, the truth a bitter pill. "I don't know if I can answer that, but I know I don't want to lose my family. I don't want Kelly to grow up in a broken home." Heather's gaze met his, her eyes searching his face for something, perhaps for the man she thought she had married. "And what about me, Jerry? What am I supposed to do? Just wait around hoping you'll one day wake up and actually want to be my husband?" The raw pain in her voice cut through Jerry, his own discomfort paling in comparison. "I'm sorry, Heather. I truly am. I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I can see now how selfish I've been." Heather looked away, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know if sorry is enough, Jerry. I feel like I'm screaming on the inside all the time and you're not even here." Jerry reached out, tentatively taking her hand. "I hear you, Heather. I do. And I'm trying to be here. Let's find a way to make this work, to be a real family, not just for Kelly, but for us too." Heather's hand trembled in his, her silent scream giving way to silent tears. "I want to believe that, Jerry. I really do. But I don't know if I can." The room was quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence, one filled with the possibility of healing, or perhaps the calm before the storm of further heartache. Jerry knew the road ahead would be difficult, filled with more honest conversations and hopefully real understanding. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way out of the silent scream that had enveloped their lives. In the weeks that followed, Jerry and Heather's home became a battleground of sorts, a place where small victories in communication were hard won, and the threat of regression into silence loomed large. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, there were moments of unexpected connection that hinted at the possibility of something more, something better. One such evening, as autumn painted the world in shades of orange and gold, Jerry found Heather in the backyard, her hands buried in the earth of the garden she had decided to revive on a whim. He watched her for a moment, struck by the serene focus on her face, a stark contrast to the tension that had become their norm. "Need a hand?" Jerry asked, stepping into the yard. Heather looked up, surprise flickering across her features before she masked it with a nod. "Sure, if you're offering. I'm trying to get these bulbs in before it gets too cold." Jerry knelt beside her, the cool soil grounding in a way he hadn't expected. They worked in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the rustling of leaves and the distant laughter of children playing. "It's nice, isn't it?" Heather finally said, breaking the silence. "Being out here, doing something, together." Jerry glanced at her, catching a glimpse of vulnerability. "Yeah, I've missed this, Heather. Missed us, Heather." Heather paused, her hands still. "Have you? Or do you just miss the idea of us?" Jerry sighed, the question cutting deeper than he'd anticipated. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Heather. About everything. I know I've been absent in more ways than one. But being here with you, like this, it reminds me of the good times we've had. I've taken a lot for granted, and I'm sorry for that." Heather met his gaze, searching for the sincerity in his words. "I want to believe you, Jerry, I do. But words are just words. We need more than that." Jerry nodded, the resolve in her voice sparking a determination of his own. "I know, and I'm ready to do the work, Heather. For real this time. I want to rebuild what we've lost, if you're willing to give me that chance." The air between them felt charged, a current of cautious hope mingling with the remnants of past hurts. Heather looked back at the garden, then at Jerry, a decision forming in her eyes. "Okay, Jerry. Okay, but we take it one day at a time. And we need to be honest with each other even when it's hard. Especially then." Jerry reached for her hand, his heart lighter than it had been in months. "One day at a time. And honesty no matter what, I promise." As they turned back to their gardening, the task at hand took on a new significance. It wasn't just about planting bulbs anymore, it was about laying the groundwork for a future they both desperately wanted to believe in. The garden, with its promise of new life come spring, became a metaphor for their marriage, a reminder that with care, patience, and a willingness to get one's hands dirty, growth was possible. The flicker of hope that had ignited in Jerry's heart grew a little brighter that evening, fueled by the simple act of planting flowers with Heather. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. The flicker of hope that had ignited between Jerry and Heather during their time in the garden began to grow, casting a gentle light over the shadowed corners of their relationship. Yet, as autumn deepened into winter, bringing with it the inevitable chill and darkness, Jerry found himself wrestling with a familiar sense of resignation. It was a quiet evening, the house wrapped in the kind of silence that follows a day spent in shared, yet separate activities. Kelly was at a friend's house, and Jerry and Heather found themselves alone, a rarity that once would have been cause for avoidance. Heather was curled up on one end of the couch, a book forgotten in her lap, while Jerry sat at the other end, pretending to be absorbed in a documentary flickering on the TV. The space between them, though physically small, felt like a vast expanse filled with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Jerry glanced at Heather, noticing the way the soft light from the lamp highlighted the lines of concentration on her face. "Heather," he began, his voice tentative, "do you ever think about, what if?" Heather looked up, her expression guarded. "What if what, Jerry?" "What if we hadn't rushed into things? What if we'd taken more time to really know each other, to be sure?" Heather closed her book, setting it aside as she turned to face him fully. "I think about it sometimes," she admitted, "but wondering about what if doesn't change where we are now, does it?" Jerry sighed, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. "No, it doesn't, but it makes me think about what we're doing, about why we're trying so hard to hold on to something that's always felt off." Heather's eyes narrowed slightly, a hint of defensiveness in her posture. "Are you saying you want to stop trying?" "No, that's not what I'm saying," Jerry hurried to clarify. I'm tired, Heather. Tired of feeling like I'm living a life that's not mine, tired of pretending everything's okay when it's not." Heather watched him, her expression softening. "I'm tired too, Jerry. Tired of feeling like I'm not enough, like I'm always competing with a ghost for your attention." The honesty of her words struck a chord in Jerry, and he moved closer, bridging the gap between them. "I never wanted you to feel that way, Heather. It's not about you not being enough. It's about me not being honest with myself, with you, about what I really wanted." Heather reached out, her hand finding his. "Maybe we both need to be honest about what we want for our future, Jerry. Maybe it's time to accept that being good parents to Kelly doesn't necessarily mean we have to be together." Jerry felt a mixture of relief and sorrow at her words. Relief that she understood, and sorrow for the life they tried to build together. "I want you to be happy, Heather. And I want to be happy too. Maybe our happiness doesn't lie together, but apart." Heather nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I want that too, Jerry. Happiness for both of us. And for Kelly. She deserves to see us both at our best, even if that means we're not together." As they sat in silence, the documentary on the TV long forgotten, Jerry felt a sense of resignation settle over him. Not the resignation of defeat, but the acceptance of reality. It was a painful yet freeing realization that sometimes love wasn't enough to fix what was broken, that sometimes the bravest thing to do was to let go. In that moment, Jerry and Heather made a silent pact to move forward with respect and kindness, to navigate the uncertain waters of separation with the well-being of their daughter as their guiding star. It was the end of one chapter in their lives, but the beginning of another, one filled with the promise of individual growth and the pursuit of personal happiness. Months had passed since Jerry and Heather made the difficult decision to separate. It was a period of adjustment, of finding new rhythms in the solo parenting of Kelly and redefining what family meant in this altered state. Jerry found himself in a reflective mood one crisp, clear evening as he sat on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Kelly, now more attuned to the emotional undercurrents of her parents, had grown in resilience and understanding far beyond her years. She had adapted to the changes with a grace that Jerry couldn't help but admire. It was during one of their weekends together that she joined him on the porch, her small hand finding his as she settled beside him. "Dad, are you okay?" Kelly's voice was soft, tinged with concern. Jerry squeezed her hand, offering her a smile. "Yeah, kiddo, I'm okay. Just doing some thinking." Kelly leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "About you and Mom." "Yeah, and about everything that's happened. It's been a lot, hasn't it?" Jerry's voice was wistful, his heart aching with love for his daughter. Kelly nodded, her presence a comforting weight against his side. "It has. But I think we're doing okay, all things considered." Jerry chuckled, the sound tinged with a hint of sadness. "You're right, we are. You've been amazing through all of this, you know that. Kelly shrugged, a gesture so reminiscent of Heather that it made Jerry's heart twinge. I just want you and Mom to be happy, even if it's not together. That's okay, you know. Jerry looked down at his daughter, struck by her maturity. You're wise beyond your years, Kelly. I'm proud of you. They sat in silence for a while, the world around them bathed in the soft glow of twilight. It was Jerry who broke the silence, his voice reflective. You know, Kel, this whole thing with your mum and me, it's made me realize a lot about myself, about the choices I've made. Kelly looked up at him, curiosity in her eyes. Like what? Like how important it is to be honest, not just with the people you love, but with yourself too. And how sometimes letting go is the only way to move forward, to find happiness. Kelly considered his words, then nodded. It's like in those books you read me when I was little. The heroes had to go through tough stuff before they got to the happy part. Jerry smiled, the analogy fitting in a way he hadn't expected. Exactly, and we're in our tough stuff now, but we'll get to our happy part too in time. Kelly smiled, a mirror of Jerry's optimism. I believe that, Dad. We'll get there. As the sky darkened and the first stars began to twinkle in the evening sky, Jerry felt a sense of peace settle over him. The journey ahead would not be without its challenges, but with Kelly by his side and the lessons he'd learned about love, honesty and letting go, he felt ready to face whatever came next. The reflection of the past months, with all its pain and growth, had brought Jerry to a place of understanding and acceptance. He knew now that happiness was not a destination but a journey, one that required courage, honesty and the willingness to embrace change. And as he looked at Kelly, her face alight with hope and love, Jerry knew that no matter what the future held, they would navigate it together, finding joy in the journey and strength in each other. A year had passed since Jerry and Heather decided to go their separate ways, a year filled with challenges, growth, and unexpected moments of grace. It was during a quiet afternoon in the park, watching Kelly play with friends, that Jerry and Heather found themselves sitting side by side on a bench, a scene they had lived countless times before, yet now under a different light. Heather broke the silence, her voice softer than Jerry had heard in a long time. You know, I never thought we'd be here, in this place, feeling. Okay. Jerry turned to look at her, noticing the way the sunlight played in her hair, a reminder of the beauty he had once fallen for. Me neither. It's been hard, hasn't it? But somehow we've made it work. Heather nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. Yeah, we have. Kelly's happy, isn't she? She is, Jerry agreed, pride swelling in his chest. And that's what matters most. We've done something right, Heather. The conversation lapsed into a comfortable silence, both lost in their thoughts, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It was Jerry who spoke next, his voice tinged with a newfound wisdom. I've learned a lot this past year about myself, about us. I think the biggest lesson was understanding that love, real love, isn't about holding on to someone at all costs. It's about wanting the best for them, even if that means letting go. Heather turned to him, her eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. I've learned that too. And I've learned to forgive, not just you, but myself. We were both just trying to find our way. Jerry reached out, his hand brushing against hers, a gesture of camaraderie and shared history. Forgiveness. That was a hard one for me. But you're right. It's necessary. For moving forward, for healing. Heather clasped his hand for a moment, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. Do you think we'll ever find what we're looking for, Jerry? Happiness, I mean. Jerry looked out at Kelly, her laughter a balm to the soul, and felt a surge of hope. I think we're on the right path, Heather. Happiness isn't a place or a person. It's this. He gestured to the park, to Kelly, to the space between them, finding peace in the present, learning from the past, and looking forward to the future. Heather squeezed his hand before letting go, standing up as Kelly ran over, her face flushed with the joy of play. "Mom, Dad, come on, you have to see this." As they followed Kelly, Jerry felt a sense of completeness, a chapter closing with the promise of new beginnings. The lessons learned of love, forgiveness, and the pursuit of happiness were etched deep in his heart, guiding him forward. The emotional epilogue of Jerry's journey was not an end but a beginning, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of love in all its forms. As he walked beside Heather and Kelly, Jerry knew that whatever the future held, the lessons learned would light the way, a beacon of hope in the ever-unfolding story of life.